Hi everybody and welcome to the A-List. I'm Matt Manetti. With me today we have from Fox News Chicago, Corey McPherrin. Corey, thank you for coming
it's my
to
pleasure,
the show.
Matt. Nice to be
here. And the first thing I gotta ask you, Cubs or Sox? I gotta ask you this.
It's a standard question. Do I have to answer this? So half the viewing public will then hate me? Is that how am I winning that one? Well, here's how I'll answer that. First of all, being a sportscaster, I have to be fair to all teams, and I try to be. But the fact is that I grew up in the south suburbs, and Comiskey Park, as it was then called, was about 12 miles from my front door. So that was the only park I went to until I was about 20 years old. So that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
All right, and now starting off, during your childhood, was sports always important to you when you were growing up? Did you play any when you first started growing up?
Absolutely, yeah. I was constantly playing something: baseball, basketball, football. I was a swimmer as well through high school and at college, but did a little bit of everything. And as I got interested in sports, I also found myself really attracted to watching sports on TV, which obviously makes sense, but also kind of I was interested in the broadcasters, the folks who either presented the news and the sports on TV or doing the play-by-play of the various teams, and I just was fascinated by that. And I think it was in high school, Matt. I was playing baseball, and I've told this story before, but it was my sophomore year, and somehow I got to first base. I was probably hit by a pitch or somebody made an error. It was about the only way I was getting there. And I was taking my lead off, and my coach yelled over, was making his signs, and I couldn't tell what he was trying to tell me. And eventually he said, "McPherrin, steal on the next pitch." He was like ticked off because I wasn't reading his sign. And so I ran as hard as I could, and of course I was out by about 15 feet. And I said at the time, I ran back to the dugout and looked at my coach. Of course, my head was down. And I thought to myself, well, my dream of being a major league player probably isn't going to become a reality, so perhaps I should consider Plan B. And Plan B was to be around sports as much as I could, and that's what I tried to do, and so far it's worked.
Okay, so then basically you always knew that you wanted to be a sports broadcaster growing up?
Yeah, I actually did, which I guess is unusual, but I probably knew when I was 12 or 13 what I wanted to do. I didn't know necessarily I wanted to be a TV sportscaster or maybe a play-by-play guy, or maybe even at that time I was thinking it would be cool to be a beat writer too. So I knew I wanted to be in the sports journalism field. I knew that, and most everybody that I knew had no idea what they wanted to do, and I kind of did. So that was unusual, but I still, my idea about what it would be like, it's proved to be everything I'd hoped it would be.
Now, when you were growing up and you were watching sports, did you have any idols that you followed, or maybe not necessarily, they don't have to be players, but any broadcasters around when you were growing up that you followed closely? Right.
Well, I'd answer that in a couple of ways. As far as just the athletes that I really admired and followed and thought the world of. Dick Butkus was a guy who was in his prime when I was a kid, and in my mind, one of the great defensive players in the history of football, and just so much fun to watch. Even when the Bears were terrible, he was fun to watch. Bobby Hull was just such a charismatic figure for the Blackhawks and was such a dominant player in his era. And he was much like Michael Jordan was to many kids growing up in the 80s and 90s. Bobby Hull was to us in the 60s and early 70s. And as far as broadcasters go, a couple of guys come to mind from here in Chicago that I looked up to and really enjoyed watching. One was Brent Musburger, who's now on the network and has been for 30 years at ABC right now and ESPN. But he was a local sportscaster on Channel 2 in town. And I looked at him and I thought, gosh, someday I'd like to do what he's doing and kind of emulate some of the things that he brings to the table. And the other guys were Jack Brickhouse, who was a longtime broadcaster for Cubs, Sox, Bears, and many other teams. And Bob Elson, longtime play-by-play guy for the White Sox, are some of the people that I looked up to and thought a lot of.
Okay, now you were saying, you grew up on the south side. Now, what high school did you go to?
I went to Hillcrest High School, which is in Country Club Hills. I actually grew up in the town of Markham, but I went to Hillcrest and graduated in 1973.
And was there any programs for sports broadcasting? Did you have a TV studio or anything like that growing up, a radio station?
Yeah, we did not. you're so lucky to have one. At the time, I'd hear about different schools that had radio or TV stations, and I thought, gosh, that would be unbelievable to have that. I didn't. All we had was a school newspaper called The Pinion. I'm not sure what that means, but so I wrote for the newspaper and learned to, I mean, that's kind of one of the basics if you want to go into the business and be certainly on the talent side, is to be able to write and write well and quickly. And so that was kind of an important thing to do, and I enjoyed that a lot. But that was all we had. So you guys are fortunate.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back after this. Okay, welcome back to the A-List. I'm Manetti. I'm here with Fox News Chicago's Corey McPherrin, and before the break, we were talking about your high school. Now, after high school, I assume you went on to college.
I did.
And well, what college was that?
I went to Butler University, which is in Indianapolis, and I'm still involved with the school today. It's a great school of about 4,000 kids in a nice residential area on the north side of Indianapolis. And when I looked at schools, I wanted to stay in the Midwest. I wanted a school that wasn't huge. I wanted a school that had a good, in those days it was called radio and television. The radio's kind of lost its status these days, but it's called media arts now, I believe. But so I looked for that, and I looked also for a school where I could swim competitively, and that school seemed to fit all the requirements, about 3 hours from Chicago. And so I went there for 4 years and graduated in 1977.
Well, what was your degree in?
It was a Bachelor of Science in Communications.
Okay, and then after that, did you need any training to become a sports broadcaster, or did you have to go back to learn the art of sports broadcasting, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Well, the way it worked then, and kind of the way it works today, is once you finish school, I mean, some people choose to go on and perhaps get a master's degree, depending on what direction they want to go in. But for an on-air kind of path, you don't necessarily have to do that. The idea is to get out and get experience as soon as you can. And I was lucky at Butler. We were able to get on the air early and often on the radio station. And then there was a terrific internship program at the local TV stations where all of us had a chance to work. And I worked at the ABC station for a semester and got tremendous experience there. And so then when you're done, you just simply you try to get something on tape, and the people at the TV station where I interned let me do a couple of auditions, and I had that on a little tape, and you send letters around. And I remember, Matt, I sent like 95 letters to every kind of middle market TV station in the Midwest and beyond. And of those 95 letters, I think I got back like 5 responses of any kind, and it turns out 2 of them had jobs. One was in Champaign, and the other was in Davenport, Iowa. And I ended up getting the job in Davenport, Iowa as a news reporter.
Okay, and then, so Davenport was your first, where you first started off on. Where'd you go after that?
Well, I was in Davenport, Iowa, the garden spot of the Midwest, I like to call it, the Quad Cities. And I was in Davenport for a little less than a year. And I was doing news there, and what I really wanted to do, as I described, was sports. But I couldn't find a sports job. I looked really hard, but I couldn't. So I heard about a job down in Quincy, Illinois, which is an even smaller market further south from the Quad Cities, and I was able to get that job. And there I did, actually it was interesting, we did both a sportscast, and I also was the weatherman on the newscast every night at 6 and 10 o'clock, and sometimes I'd be doing the weather, and I would say stuff like, yeah, it's going to be 65 and sunny tonight, and down in St. Louis, it's going to be beautiful weather when the Reds and Pete Rose come to town. I would try to throw in some sports references and stuff like that.
So did you think that the weather, even though it wasn't sports, did you think it would be good do you think it kind of helped you because you got more on-air experience even though you weren't doing sports, but did it still help you, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had no choice. That was how the job came. So the guy said, if you want the sports job, you got to do the weather, too. And I said, oh, geez, okay. Because I knew nothing about weather and still don't, actually. But Yeah, I think looking back, because you do the weather and you're standing up there and you're just making stuff up. I mean, it's not like it's scripted. There's no teleprompter. You're just saying, okay, here's the high pressure system. And I remember you'd get these little rubberized magnetic map, components. You put the sun up and the high pressure system. And looking back, I mean, I don't think I enjoyed it very much, but I think the idea that I had to do it and kind of figured it out, and I think it was a positive thing looking back. It really was. It helped me feel more comfortable standing up and kind of improvising.
Okay, besides Davenport and Quincy, what other cities or markets have you been in?
Yeah. How much time do we have, Matt?
It's
a long list. That's why I said it. No, from Davenport, I could open like a travel agency or something. I went from Davenport to Quincy to New Orleans, which was a great break in a real TV market with real sports going on. The Saints were there, and there was Tulane football and basketball. LSU was right up the road. The Jazz had just left for Utah at that time. There was a women's basketball league team. The Sugar Bowl was there, fights and big-time fights in New Orleans. There was lots of stuff to cover, so that was a blast. From New Orleans, I went to Denver, to the ABC station there, to a really good station with a lot of really talented people. And I guess it was in New Orleans for about a year, and I was in Denver for a couple of years. Do you want the whole list here, Matt? Then I went to Atlanta, Atlanta for about 2.5 years, worked for the CBS station there. And then I got a great break and went to New York to WABC, the ABC TV station, and did the sports on the 6 and 11 o'clock news. And I eventually did work for ABC Sports and Wide World of Sports and play-by-play for the network and all kinds of neat stuff. And then in '91, I had a chance to come home to Chicago to initially to BBM, Channel 2, which I took full advantage of and was thrilled to come home.
Okay, and that's great. And we'll have more with Corey McPherrin after the break. Okay, hi and welcome back to the A-List. I'm Manetti. I'm here with Corey McPherrin from Fox News Chicago. Now, Corey, before the break, we were talking about kind of where your path along the way to here in Chicago, and from what I understand, you won an Emmy in Atlanta. And how was that? Do you think that kind of helped your career move along?
Well, actually, it kind of did in a weird way. I won an Emmy for News Performer of the Year in the state of Georgia. I guess it was, I'm not even sure what the year was, but I get it all confused. It's a long time ago, but it was, I guess, 84 maybe. But what happened was that particular Emmy competition, each time, for example, in Chicago, when there's an Emmy competition, they send all the Emmy awards to another Emmy organization, say in San Francisco or Minneapolis or Dallas or New York. That particular year, the Georgia Emmys were judged in New York, and somebody who was on the committee judging the Emmys saw the tape I put together, and they thought, wow, he could do. We were looking for a sports guy at our station. I should tell my boss about him, and so forth and so on. So they heard about me through the Emmy Awards competition, and all of a sudden I'm working in New York like 3 months later. So weird things happen like that. So that it helped me more that way than it did like any prestige that came from winning the Emmy.
Okay, now I'm from New York. Obviously, you came here to Chicago. Now, New York, you got the Yankees, the Mets, the Knicks, a lot of history in sports. Well, what made you want to come back to Chicago? Because there's a long history of sports excellence in New York.
Right, that's true. I guess it really was, and actually there were a lot of people in New York who wondered the same thing, because New York is the #1 market. It's people aspire to get there, and I enjoyed my time there. Don't get me wrong, I really did. It was a blast, but you know what? It was just a pull that I had going back to my childhood about covering the teams that I grew up watching, and the idea that you knew the history, and my parents, my family, my brothers, my friends are all here, and just the idea I could go back and do what I wanted to do since I was 12 or 13 years old. It was like a dream come true. Not to sound overly trite about it, but it really was that kind of a thing. And actually, I mean, if my hometown was Peoria or something, that probably wouldn't have been the move I'd make. But Chicago was, as the third market compared to the first. It's not like you're going to take a cut in pay or prestige to any degree. So to me, it wasn't an easy call. I was very fortunate to have a chance to make a decision about where I wanted to work, and I have no regrets. And the other part of it is that I was able to raise my kids here in Chicago, which the whole idea of the Midwest and Chicago in particular to raise my family was more appealing, I guess, than being on the East Coast as well. So all those things played a factor in it.
Okay, now you work at Fox News Chicago. Could you give us kind of an idea of how your day goes when you come into the office, between what you do when you come in and before you go on?
Right. Well, what I love about my job is that every day is a little bit different, and so there's no like regular day. Some days I may have to do an interview with the Bulls in Deerfield at 11 o'clock in the morning, or during the fall, almost every Wednesday, I'll go up to Lake Forest to check in on the Bears and have to be there by noon every day. I do a high school piece every week, and I go out to some high school, God knows where. Yesterday I was in Wheaton. And so some days you start early and some days a little bit later. The things that are consistent, for the most part, are the hours in the evening where you have to be there to actually, there's two parts of it. One, you're kind of going out and doing the interviews and getting the material. Then you have to come back and sift through it and decide what you're going to use and what format it's going to be used, and kind of the way the show's going, the rundown of the show, what the graphics look like, all kinds of little details that I work with a producer on constantly throughout the day. We talk on the phone 10, 12 times a day, and then when we get in the office, we put it all together. And then maybe from 7:30 till airtime, you're crafting and writing and watching the games too, which is a critical part. People laugh at me, what do? I watch games. That's really tough. But that's part of what you do, is you watch games to be able to describe what the heck's going on. So it's a combination of all those factors. And then usually I'm there another 45 minutes after the show to kind of get things organized for the next day and answer email or phone calls or whatnot. And it can be long. Sundays in the fall are really long because we do a morning Bears show, and I'm there from like 9:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. But it's a great job, and it's a lot of fun.
And overall, how many years have you been in sports broadcasting, would you say?
Well, I think it works out to 29 years. And when I say that, I really feel old. Thanks. It's a long time, but the thing, I got to tell you though, I still enjoy what I do as much as I did when I started. So I don't think many people can say that. So I feel blessed in that way.
Okay, and we're going to take another break here, and we'll have more after the break. Welcome back to the A-List. I'm Manetti. I'm here with Fox News Chicago's Corey McPherrin. And Corey, one of the things I like about every week, Sunday night after the Bears, turn on Fox 32, 10 o'clock, you and Tom Waddle on The Final Word, probably one of my favorite sports shows. And I just want to know, what is it like working with Tom Waddle?
Well, it's a burden, I must say, but it's one that I shoulder with great enthusiasm. No, he's a good guy, and he's one of the few really ex-jocks that I've encountered along the way that kind of gets it, the idea that you can't just show up and kind of wing it. He works at it, and I think it comes across. And he's also just a fun guy to be around, likes to goof around, and we have a good relationship, rapport, I think. And I think we try to get the information out while having a good time at the same time. So we have a blast with that. And all the guys, there's a lot of guys behind the scenes that you never see that contribute tremendously to that show with ideas and with writing and watching the tapes and watching the games and putting pieces together. And it's a real team effort that brings that together. But we have a blast with it.
Okay, now in the future, do you think that you're here in Chicago, you're here to stay, or do you think that there might come a time where another opportunity might arise that you may find yourself thinking about maybe moving out of Fox or necessarily maybe out of Chicago?
Right. You know, I mean, you never say never. You never know what's going to happen, what's right around the next bend, and you got to be prepared. And anybody in my business has to realize that nothing's forever, because maybe a change in management. You know, people move a lot in my business, and I've been lucky to be at one place now for, I guess it's now about 11 years. So, that's. I'm really pleased to be able to say that. I don't have any aspiration to move anywhere. People always ask, what about ESPN, you know? Mm-hmm. That really isn't on my radar screen. I love working in a market where you can, first of all, as I've described many times, this is my hometown. So
Mm-hmm.
why do I really want to go anywhere? I've already been to New York. You know, what else?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing out there I really want to do. I love what I'm doing. I love the idea to connect with the people in the community and the different teams and being kind of close to everything, and that's what appeals to me. And I'm hopeful I can, you know, kind of stay the course until it's time for me to retire.
Okay. And now you said you did a little bit of radio in college. I just wanted to know, like, radio versus TV, which did you prefer?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did a lot of radio, both in college, doing play-by-play for Butler football and basketball, which I enjoyed a lot. And I did some in Quincy for the Quincy High School basketball team, which went all the way to the state finals when I was there. And a little bit here and there along the way and at different other markets as well. But I think the TV is just more appealing because there's more to it. You know, the visual element, there's a little more creativity. There's it's a little more complex, I guess. And I enjoyed that part of it, putting pieces together, producing stories, and although radio has its high points, TV appealed to me more.
Okay, and we're running short on time, so I would just want to ask you, well, what advice would you give to any of our viewers or anybody that came up to you and said, I want to be like you and pursue a career in sports broadcasting? What advice would you give them?
Well, one thing, that business is tougher and tougher today than it's ever been, as far as getting a job and getting a job that pays well. It's more and more difficult all the time. The big thing is, go to a school, a good school that just isn't solely communications, that gives you a well-rounded background, well-rounded education, but get experience. If you can work for a cable access station or a radio station, anything, write for your paper, whatever you can do, the more skills you can accumulate, the better off you are. And don't think too big too early. Go small, get experience, and build yourself up step by step.
Okay, and then I want to thank Mr. McPherrin. I want to thank you for coming out on the
thank you.
show. And I'm Manetti. Once again, my guest today was Corey McPherrin, and we'll see you next time on the A-List.